Good morning and welcome to Redeemer Lutheran Church. I'm Pastor Gary Lodeholt. There's the famous joke about the church that used to put the upcoming Sunday sermon title on their sign out front. The pastor had also given the custodian of the sign some extra lines on the sign to use to encourage people to come to church. So, one Sunday, the pastor pulled into the parking lot and read the sign that said, "What is hell like? Come hear our choir." Well, that certainly is far from the truth where I serve here at Redeemer. Our choirs and musicians are excellent and real treasures for us. They lead us in our worship and fill us with inspiration that touches our hearts. Indeed, Martin Luther once said, "Next to the Word of God, the noble art of music is the greatest treasure in the world." Maybe one of the best gifts of church is that it's the one of the last places in our society where we sing together. We lift our voices in song, in praise of God, and in response to the things God has done in our lives. And you may not realize it, but that happens all over the Bible. Over and over, the great men and women of the Bible noticed what God had done and broke into song in response to it. This week, as we begin Advent, we're going to look at a few of those songs. And we always think about Mary singing soft lullabies to the baby Jesus this time of year. So I'm calling this series Lullabies to Wake You Up. Wake up to God's radical love. Wake up to God active in our world. Wake up to the new thing God is doing. Wake up because the world is changing. That's what these songs are about. Our first song is one you've probably never paid much attention to, although we have talked about it several times before. It's actually two songs, the song of Moses and the song of his sister Miriam. These were songs that Moses sang and Miriam sang right after the people had crossed the Red Sea and the waters had come back and destroyed their Egyptian pursuers. Now, before we get into it directly, I need to tell you that it is likely that these songs are some of the oldest, unchanged material we have in the Bible. You probably know that for years the Bible was passed down by word of mouth, and so over time, errors in memory creeped in, and some changes were made as a natural result. But it's hard to make changes in poetry. Poetry tends to move from generation to generation unchanged. So it's likely that these songs go back, perhaps all the way to right after the Red Sea event. Another interesting thing about these two songs is that in ancient Israel, it was the job of the women to respond to and interpret events through song. So, the most likely scenario here is that Miriam's song came first, and Moses copied and expanded her song. I wanted you to know that Moses' song was there, but Miriam's simple song has so much power in just a couple of lines. So let's look at her song. Sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. Horse and rider he has thrown into the sea. Now, I don't think we're in danger of that catching on as a top 40 hit, but maybe it should. For Miriam's words are dynamite for our world, especially in Advent. In the midst of a world where evil seems to triumph, in the midst of a world where we are poor and downtrodden and face to face with forces more powerful than we are, where things are beyond our power or control, when we have no place to turn, Miriam reminds us that God is with us. She reminds us that God is for us. She reminds us that God acts. She reminds us that God saves. Horse and rider he has thrown into the sea, she sings. God acts to overcome evil and save God's people. It's the best kind of triumphing gloriously. That's just what we need to hear during Advent. In Advent, we focus on just how much we need God to act, on how dark our world is, and how far away from God it sometimes seems. In Advent, we hope for things to change, for God to act, for God to save. Miriam reminds us that God does. Miriam calls us to wake up to God's radical love, to wake up to God active in our world, to wake up to the new thing God is doing, to wake up because the world is changing. All that's wrong in the world has been thrown into the sea. Wake up and rise into God's new creation. God has triumphed gloriously. Thanks for watching, and remember to let this day belong to God.